Welcome everyone to another video, and in this video we're going to be doing the 2700-ish ELO range analysis, trying to understand how you can improve in GBL. People at this rating are very competent battlers. They obviously know their typings, they know how to battle. They generally optimize their gameplay to a certain extent. What usually is missing is like one or two things that they're doing wrong in every battle, or they're not pushing their gameplay to the maximum that separates them from people that are already legend or above. So this person was very gracious in providing me their battles. They are using an XL Gavantula with the standard moveset. They're using a Lapras with Ice Beam. Just going to put the standard IVs and Empoleon. So essentially what they're doing is they have Gavantula double water tanks, right? So both these Pokemon in the back are weak to fighting, but they're also both water types, which cover Gavantula's essentially like ground and fire weakness. More so the ground types, like for example, Galarian Stunfisk, or to a lesser extent, Swampert. This team is a little bit unconventional. I don't really see this variation of the team too much. Typically, you would see like Toxicrow leading these two, or for example, you might see like Swampert instead of Lapras. But pretty interesting team. I've already reviewed the battles. I've made a bunch of notes. I am going to let's see here. Okay, so there are a couple grades here. Actually, I want to provide. Actually, no, I'll forget that. I'll talk about their grades and things that they did well. But I've made a bunch of notes, so let's go ahead and get started with the battles. I might replay them. Actually, well, let's rate this team first, actually. I forgot to do that part. Okay, let's go ahead and do this team rating. As you can see, generally what you want to do is you want to stay switch with this team because as you can see, the coverage is very low because obviously it's two water types and electric bug type. Very little bulk, most because Empoleon and Gavantula are pretty squishy. Safety, because there's no great safe switch. Both Empoleon and Lapras are very questionable safe switch. A really good safe switch would be something like Gallade, or something like Snorlax or Alolan Muck. Those are all really great safe switch. Consistency is high. There's not that much baiting. Well, I guess there's a little bit of baiting with Gavantula, but a lot of it is the fast move pressure. So as you can see, actually this is in the wrong league. Premier. Let's see here if we can regenerate here. You can see potential threats are Swampert, which does really well against all three Pokemon. Machamp, Magnezone, Snorlax. So that's why typically you would see a fighter instead of Gavantula. But let's go ahead and get started with some of the battles here. So I'm going to pause it for some of the leads here. So obviously this is a extremely positive lead, right? So actually let me just speed this up just so we can play a little bit faster here. So I'll just quickly do this one here. Gavantula, I had to put to level 50 annoyingly. Manually. Politoed, I'll just turn to PvP IVs here. Let's just assume that it has Blizzard. I actually think this one has Earthquake. So we'll just put Earthquake here. You'll see that Gavantula wins this matchup pretty easily. Obviously, the Discharge does a lot of damage. Lunge does a pretty sizable chunk. But obviously, Discharge is super effective. So pretty great lead. But the problem with Gavantula is that it's very easy to catch a move. And it is kind of difficult to play in the lead, especially when the Pokemon is not locked in. Actually, I'm going to adjust this screen slightly here. Sorry for that. We're missing a part of this screen here. So I want to make sure we capture it all. Yeah, that looks good. So let's go ahead. You can see the Weather Ball does a pretty sizable chunk. Leaves it below half. They actually under-tap. You'll notice that they actually under-tap the Discharge. So you can see, if we look here. Okay. Nope, okay. Let me go back a little bit here. So okay. Let me just go back to the beginning here. This thing's a little bit grainy here. You can see they actually throw in the middle of the, well, they throw and then they actually get the extra volt switch. And this player does a really nice job of under tapping. Basically what they do is they wait for the energy to load because they got the fast move during the opponent's charge moves, and then they wait and then they throw the move. Unfortunately, the opponent switched out into a Alolan Muck, so they end up throwing a discharge into a Alolan Muck instead of what the preferred move would be, lunge, because discharge and lunge do about the same damage. Discharge is a little bit more to a Alolan Muck, but lunge comes with the debuff potential. So you can see there. And actually I want to highlight something pretty interesting here that the person did here. So what they did here was they actually end up catching the move. So it takes 4 snarls for the Alolan Muck to get a move, and they must have saw that the Alolan Muck got an extra snarl in. So what they did was they actually did 2 volt switches, waited half a second for the animation to complete on Alolan Muck's side, and then actually ended up catching the move onto Lapras, which was a really nice play here. So it was a really, really beautiful play, really well done. And then they actually make a really nice play here. So the really subtle play that players at a lower level, lower elo range would typically do is they would throw the surf at the Muck because they're in a hurry, they're under pressure to take out the Muck because the Muck is about to get to a charge move. But the thing is that Alolan Muck wins CMP versus Lapras. So this player chooses to not fire the move right away and build up additional energy before throwing the surf, which I think was a really nice subtle play. Something you might not notice if you're not looking to optimize your gameplay. So here, they throw after 2. The Alolan Muck, it takes 4 snarls to get to the Dark Pulse, and they win CMP. So ideally, you want to throw after 3 Ice Shards, because that way you're throwing before they get to move, because you're obviously going to lose CMP, and you maximize your energy as much as possible. Obviously, the energy is not going to go that far versus the Politoed that's expected to come back in, because obviously Politoed is a water type and this Lapras only has water and ice moves. But you also have a little bit less HP that the Politoed can potentially farm. Makes it a little bit more difficult. You can potentially stall the clock. You can get out of the mat. You can switch out if you want to. But as you can see, there's a lot of things that are done there. So pretty good. Doing 2 ice shards. I think 3 would have been better. So they get a little bit more energy. But they're still looking pretty good here. Actually, this video is still slightly cut off here. It's going to move it. Oh, there you go. As you can see, these, I personally, I wouldn't have stayed in this matchup. I probably would have built to that surf there, and then I would have went to Empoleon, because this is obviously not that great getting farmed down and giving the Politoed a lot of energy. And you're not really chipping it that much, so it has a ton of energy. Obviously, getting that additional farm earlier is going to help pay off. So as you can see here, this opponent does something really good. Or not the opponent. This player does something really good. They recognize that this opponent really likes to catch. So you notice that time, they didn't bother trying to under tap and throw right away. They actually built up additional move here before throwing. And that allowed them to land this lunge onto the Abomasnow, which I think was a really great play. They get the extra Volt Switch because they know they need energy for later. So it's a pretty tricky matchup here because the Abomasnow still has a shield, but obviously the energy balls are now debuffed, so now they do less than half, which is really critical for this Empoleon matchup because it means that the Abomasnow has to throw 2 charge moves, energy ball plus a weather ball in order to KO, as opposed to 2 energy balls. So really nice play, as you can see here. If it wasn't debuffed, that definitely would KO. They switch out here, and the opponent does a really nice job at taking advantage of a gap in the gaps in the clock. They throw the Drill Peck here, which I think is a nice play. And what do they do here? They come into Galvantula, and as you can see, that extra Volt Switch that they did earlier is now going to pay off because it allows them to get to the lunge and win game number 1. So really impressive play. Obviously, the opponent got a move off, caught the move, but as you can see, this player adapted along the way, which is what I would normally expect at around this ELO range. So really well done. A little bit more optimization against Alolan Muck is probably the only thing I would say, and then perhaps not throwing it right away against the Politoed, knowing that they have a potential to switch when you try to undertap. So besides that, really well done, really great game number one. Really, that's something I would expect from someone in this like expert range area. So obviously not everyone plays exactly like this, but they have like different strengths and weaknesses, but really nice gameplay. So in this lead, Galvantula doesn't have the worst matchup against Alolan Ninetales. Let me just put it up here. Doesn't have, oh, okay, actually has a pretty bad matchup against Alolan Ninetales. As you can see, the powder, the thing is that it just outpaces the Galvantula, right? So obviously if there was some like baiting that could happen here, then it's like kind of closer, but it's definitely not a great matchup. And you have two Pokemon that have fantastic matchups against Alolan Ninetales. This one has Dazzling Gleam. So you can see Lapras has a good matchup in the 0 and then wins the 1. Then Empoleon obviously absolutely dominates Alolan Ninetales, so super strong matchup. So you definitely don't want to stay here, and they likely have some coverage in the back. So let's go ahead. They throw the 1-2 volt switches, which I don't mind, and they switch out into Lapras. There wasn't realistically any way for them to catch the move there, because it would take 5 turns, and they threw 4 turns worth of moves. They do throw the Dazzling Gleam, what I presume is Dazzling Gleam. I don't know what language this is. German, probably? I'm not sure. Someone can tell me. So the Ninetales actually switched out here. So this is actually kind of weird, to be honest, because I do expect that there's going to be a Jellicent. Typically, you see Ninetales with Jellicent. It's a very strong core. But it looks like they don't have any coverage for Lapras, which means that they probably don't have great coverage against Empoleon either. So this looks really promising for Empoleon. So they actually end up baiting there, which is kind of weird. So the one thing this player does really well here is that they know that the opponent hasn't switched out and they've switched out. So there's a huge gap in the clock. So they're basically picking Empoleon at 0 seconds to maximize the stall in the clock in case they need to switch. So they look like they're going to go for the big farm down. So this is looking really good for Empoleon, because obviously that's a Weather Ball. It does absolutely nothing. Double resist that. Double resist the Power Snows. Has a good amount of energy. They actually have Haunch Crow here, which is not good. So at this point in time, if I'm the player, they have to have a really solid answer for Galvantula, or else they would have switched out of they would have not let Alolan Ninetales leave Galvantula. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, they have to have a really solid answer, and I'm going to take that into consideration. So they throw the Hydro Cannon, which is really nice here. And then they bank the move and catch the move. And then here, I think they make a critical mistake. You have to know that there's a really strong answer to Galvantula in the back. And there's absolutely no reason for them to shield here. So they end up shielding the Dark Pulse. And then the opponent has a G-Fist. I wouldn't think they necessarily have a G-Fist. Obviously, G-Fist is like almost worst case scenario for this Galvantula, but you have to expect that they have something really strong against it. And burning a shield on the Galvantula ends up being the thing is, you don't want to look at a match whether or not you win or lose. Obviously, you want to understand what are the win cons you created and the lose cons you created. But whether you win a game or lose, you want to understand, did I make the best decision possible? So the opponent did really well here. They actually ended up throwing right before the switch clock came up. But this is really not great. Gonna throw here. Gonna throw 2 waterfalls to try to sink the fast moves. But then unfortunately get an extra one through. So now they have enough energy for the Earthquake. Even though it's debuff, it will still KO. And then now they're going to be in pretty big trouble at this point in time. They do a couple really nice things here. For example, they throw here on the CMP tie, knowing that they don't want to give them an extra move. Unfortunately, this move does way too much damage. And then you know there's going to be 4 more for the next one. They can't farm down, unfortunately, because this is also a CMP tie. But unfortunately, they're going to be way too low in health to be able to win that game. But they would have been able to win the game if they no-shielded on Gavantula. And that's just making a team read. You don't necessarily... This obviously is not a very conventional team. Jephus, Alolan Ninetales, and Mandibuzz. These are just 3 XL Pokemon thrown together in one team. Whether or not it makes sense or not is a different story. But when you looked at this, there's just no way you can shield Gavantula. Because no way they would have Mandibuzz in the back and leave Gavantula to roam free. So making that shield ended up costing the game. And you might not be able to recognize that when you look at the end of the game, be like, oh, they just couldn't farm down Mandibuzz. Oh, the waterfall damage just wasn't enough to take out Sunfist. Really, it was a decision about a minute ago into the game and not recognizing from the team perspective that ended up costing them the match. Still, overall, very strongly played, and they did a lot of really good things, like the really good save switch, really good CMP ties, really nice catch, really good counting, but making the wrong identification on the teams ended up being really costly for them. So, Swampert versus Gavantula versus Swampert. When we look at this matchup, it's pretty interesting. Obviously, they can't stay because any of these matchups you should be switching out of, because you have 2 answers that, as we saw, Swampert was going to be a big issue regardless. You can see here, Gavantula loses his matchup pretty easily in the Ultra League. So the opponent comes into Charizard here, which is really strange, right? I'm not sure why you would go Charizard into Lapras, but understand they want to avoid the Gavantula. So here, this player makes a pretty critical mistake. So they throw the Blast Burn. It takes 8.5 seconds to get to the Blast Burn. Clearly, the opponent threw basically right away, because they basically got to like 6 Ice Shards and then they threw. And then now they only need 6 more seconds to get to the Dragon Claw, which the Lapras is in range of. And you're going to see how this is going to unfold. So they tried to farm down, which is not a bad idea. But at this point in time, it ended up like, that means they end up not having the energy from the Lapras and they end up losing the switch advantage. Again, not the worst thing, but also not that great for the Gavantula and for the team. They throw the lunge here. So here, I really disagreed with how they approached this next part of the game. So they actually end up switching out here, which I don't think is the right move. The reason why I don't think it's the right move is that you have like an okay matchup against the Swampert. It's clearly losing, but Empoleon also loses. Most Swamperts are carrying Earthquake, and by switching out, you're still going to shield the Earthquake or the Earthquake bait from the Swampert when it throws it at the Empoleon despite the debuff. By staying in the Gavantula versus Swampert matchup, and the fact that they came in Charizard versus Lapras, you should make a team read saying like, okay, maybe they don't have an answer to a water type in the back. Whether that's true or not, whether that plays out to be true or not, it is the most logical move or logical reasoning why they came in Charizard versus Lapras. Whether that's true or not is something different, because you want to, obviously people can make mistakes when they're switching and completely throw you off, but you still want to play the most logical moves on the board. So they actually end up having Escavalier, which actually is very bad for them, and the Swampert didn't actually end up throwing versus the Empoleon, which is okay, but now it's not debuffed. So here, I don't mind. The problem here, I don't mind this shield here because you're going to burn their last shield, which I think is good, because if you can get a move off on the Swampert, that's really positive. But the problem here is you take the last shield, and then the Escavalier gets a really big farm versus the Empoleon. So here, when you're down to your last shield and your last Pokemon, you can't play it you can't play the matchups as normal. You got to really think. You got to really plan out the end game. The Swampert has so much energy. It's not debuffed anymore. The Escavalier can have Aerial Ace. It can have Acid Spray. It can have Drill Run. It can have Mega Horn. The hardest hitting move is going to be Drill Run, which is weaker than the Hydro Cannon. It probably does about the same amount of damage as Hydro Cannon because Escavalier has higher attack, but it also doesn't have steps. So Hydro Cannon for sure going to do more damage. Earthquake would probably one-shot the Galvantula. So you have to take that into consideration when you're playing the end here. This is going to hurt, but you cannot shield it. You cannot shield this move. This is a massive mistake. Shielding that move meant that there was absolutely no way they could win the game. It would have been really difficult to win in general, but imagine that Swampert throwing into the Galvantula earlier when it was debuffed. It wouldn't be doing this much damage. And as well, it would have been a really tough endgame. Empoleon versus Escavalier, but you gotta think about what's the most logical play to do. So this ended up being a really costly mistake and potentially costed them the game. That's just making the right calls as you're thinking about how much the charge moves are going to do and how to make the right decisions. So here, I think there's like a couple ways you can approach this. I don't mind the safe swap here. I do think that you should safe swap Empoleon here because Lapras is the harder counter. Galvantula does win CMP versus the Dragonite, so it doesn't have like the worst matchup. But what I would probably do here is I would have built up to the discharge and then switch to Lapras and potentially catch the move. But this is fine. The thing is that they're for sure going to have an answer to Lapras. It's not as clear that they will have an answer to Empoleon. So they throw the Drill Peck here. You kind of want to fake the Skull Bash, which this player does really well, potentially drawing a shield. Obviously, they're not going to shield. You obviously don't want to throw the Ice Beams because those are double resisted. Empoleon generally wins this matchup because it just has, especially with no Skull Bash, just because it does double resist the Ice Shards versus the Waterfalls are single resisted. But Lapras does definitely put up a pretty good fight versus the Empoleon. So this Empoleon able to get the last surf through and potentially draw a shield here. And does draw the shield, which is really great. This Empoleon is absolutely loaded. For me, I would go into Empoleon here and absorb the energy. I don't think it makes sense to burn the shield here or take the damage. But that's just how they want to play it out. They come into Swampert here. Again, this is an example of think about what is remaining. At this point in time, once you see the Swampert come in, your eyes should light up and be like, okay, this is how I'm going to play out literally the rest of the game. You stay in Galvantula versus Swampert, because Galvantula versus Swampert, especially with a little bit of energy, not that bad for Galvantula. And then Empoleon has a pretty neutral matchup against Dragonite, perhaps even winning when shields are down. So you really got to think of it this way. And then as well, here, you debuff the Swampert, but if the Swampert attempts to throw the Earthquake, you're still going to shield. So I think this is a complete waste of the debuff here. And what are you going to, like, you're not going to have Galvantula versus Dragonite. That's still not a great matchup when the Dragonite has an energy advantage. You still have to shield this, even if it's debuff. Like, you're not going to be able to survive it. So it's really, in my opinion, was a really poor call. After they made a lot of really strong plays, these are the type of decisions that can necessarily hold you back from winning more games that you potentially could have won and allow you to face a stronger opponent. So they get to both Drill Pecks here, which is great. I think they actually end up winning this game by like some miraculous play at the end. So they Dragon Claw here, which I have honestly no idea why they Dragon Clawed here. And then they end up throwing the Hurricane into this Galvantula, and then they're actually able to farm down and then have 1 HP to throw at this Swampert here. But I still, the thing is, it's regardless if you win or lose, any game you want to look back and be like, did I make all the best moves possible given the information I had at that point in time? You can't look at it in hindsight and be like, oh, they end up having this in the back, I should have known, blah blah blah. You got to think about logically, based off the information I have, what is the correct play. So in my opinion, they won the game, but they didn't make all the right plays in order to optimize their chances to win the game. So okay, but still, well done. Okay, so Snorlax versus Galvantula. This is an okay matchup. I think Snorlax actually ends up winning this matchup. Yeah, the Snorlax ends up winning the matchup, but it's kind of close. It's not the worst matchup in the world. You want to start thinking about where potential team goes. I like the switch out here. This is good. They do have potentially enough for a superpower, but it is debuffed. So I like this no shield. They end up throwing the body slam here. Here comes the Gengar. So obviously the first anti-fighter that shows up here. And kind of a tough call here. The Shadow Ball would likely take you out. I think that's a Shadow Punch. Because I think I see later on, I see them actually Shadow Ball the Lapras. So they grab the last shield, which is I think is really great. There's no way the Lapras is going to shield here. So they end up throwing the Shadow Ball, which does a lot of damage. And they end up throwing the Shadow Punch here. And then I really like this play by the player. They actually end up knowing that they're going to lose CMP versus the Gengar. You can see here, and that's going to be 4 turns for the next Shadow Punch. They actually end up catching the move onto Empoleon and preserving the energy on Galvantula, which I think is really fantastic. Really well done there. So you need to shield this because it could be a superpower. It ends up being a body slam, but the thing is, like, you can't look back on this and be like, oh, I should have no shielded the body slam. They had the energy for the superpower. That's the most logical decision at that point in time. Win, lose, or draw, right? Like, that's the most logical shield to make at that point in time. So I think that they actually ended up leaving the match. I don't know, maybe they had Talonflame or something in the back, but really nice job there. They end up going 3-2 in that set. Some good plays, some plays where they could make drastic improvements in terms of their decision making, but this is kind of what I expect at somewhat in around this ELO range. Obviously, catching the Tornadus here. Oh, very nice. Golden Raz, excellent. Results in the catch. Now they're at 26-62. So they go Galvantula into Clefable. Obviously not a great matchup for Galvantula because it's just way too squishy. They actually end up switching into Lapras, which I think is okay. So debatable decision here. I think this is okay. They throw the Ice Beam here. The Ampharos only needs 4 more turns to make it to another move, which they're obviously going to beat the Lapras too. They could have easily landed 2 Surfs, right? But then they probably would have got farmed down. So I think this was an okay decision. The farm down maybe would have not been that bad. They probably would have got a shield out of the Ampharos, but this is actually okay too. So they're basically going to look to Volt Switch down because this Ampharos likely has Thunder Punch and Focus Blast. It's a little bit of lag there. They're going to get another one here as expected. And then there's actually a really intense Volt Switch down. So they Volt Switch, and then they throw 2 here. So they're at a bunch of energy. I don't mind this move here, switching out into Empoleon, especially since Galvantula wins CMP a lot. And they, they very interestingly stay in this matchup versus Empoleon. I like the shield here. knowing that one, first off, you might not normally you wouldn't shield this because obviously this is whatever Clefable has is all resisted by Empoleon, but you can see your Empoleon health is slowly going down. Your Galvantula is almost dead, has lots of energy, but almost dead. So you got to start shielding something at some point in time. So they end up shielding that. I think that was the Meteor Mash. So I don't like that they threw right away because the Clefable threw their energy right away. They actually end up shielding. So I actually don't really like this because I think you should be taking advantage of the resisted charms to build up energy. So now they clearly know what's going to happen. They're going to go for the farm down. And then they're going to throw, and they have a very positive matchup versus the Lone Ninetales. The fast moves do absolutely no damage. They have to go up to the Dazzling Gleam. They throw the lunge here, which in my opinion, is a gigantic mistake. It doesn't make a difference in the match, but they don't have a shield, so I'm not entirely sure why they threw the lunge there. They should have just thrown double discharge and would have won this game a little bit cleaner and made the match not as close as it should have been. So, but still, really well done. Okay, all right. So, Galvantula versus Magnezone. Kind of weird matchup here. They obviously lots of resistances here. Wild Charge obviously would still hurt, but is resisted. And then they go for the lunge, which I think is the correct play for sure, because both discharge and lunge are single resisted due to the steel electric typing. So I like this play here. It's a subtle play. It's a very subtle play that they didn't throw right away, even though they threw right away the first time, in case they try to catch. And I'm not sure what this player is doing on the other side, but they're able to land the second one here, and it actually ends up being a CMP tie. Which is very good for the Galvantula. They actually throwing the Wild Charge, which doesn't do that much. So here, in my opinion, they went to the wrong switch in. Lapras is a much better, especially with Ice Beam, Ice Shard and Ice Beam, is a much more consistent Kingdra matchup. Kingdra gives problems for both, but there's no way Empoleon can beat Kingdra. And then as well, I think Empoleon has a better Magnezone matchup when it comes to farming it down at that low health. So they let the Drill Peck go through, but as you can see, these waterfalls are double resisted as opposed to neutral. And then as well, the Ice Beams are neutral as well with stab damage. But they do catch another one here, which is nice for the Empoleon. They actually end up drawing a shield, which is pretty good, even though the Kingdra definitely did not need to shield in order to win that switch. Especially since the Empoleon was quite low. So, curious how they're playing this. So, they blind throw here. So, I really like this no shield. Assuming that they blind throw the Octazooka to try to take out the Galvantula. So, they come back in Magnezone. Not great. Not great, obviously. They shield the Wild Charge, which is fantastic. I really like this switch out into Galvantula. And then going to throw the lunge here. At the Kingdra, which I think, even though Kingdra is super low, you have to throw it. They actually have no shielding, and then the Venusaur farms down, but in a really good spot here. And then throwing 2 more Ice Shards before throwing to try to sink the fast moves. Don't give them any free fast moves, because literally one fast move could cost you the entire game, and actually end up getting to the second Ice Beam here, which should be enough to KO the Venusaur. Some really nice play. Obviously, it ended up working out for them fine that they came in Empoleon into Kingdra, but I do think the superior play would have been going into Lapras and be able to come out of that matchup with a little bit of energy. But again, just my opinion. Okay, Gallade. Let's actually look up this Gallade Galvantula matchup before we move on. It's kind of a weird matchup. To be honest, it generally favors Galvantula, right? If you throw at the appropriate time, you basically want to throw straight lunge. Both of them are neutral. Obviously, lunge comes with the debuff. So I don't mind the shield here, even though it's just a Leap Blade that would be resisted. You do plan to debuff it, so that the future leaf blades end up doing less. They end up getting confusion through, which is really not that much fun. The lunge would do quite a bit. They actually ended up getting a move back, which is really good. I really don't like throwing right away here. I think that's okay. They end up throwing an extra move there, but they end up getting another confused through anyway. So they throw the lunge. So at this point in time, I think you should have switched one turn sooner. I think staying in, realizing that you're going to lose that matchup is really problematic for the Galvantula. So, but ended up like allowing them to throw the Leaf Blade, which ended up putting them into Frenzy Plant range, which is really, really not good for them. Yeah, this ends up being pretty terrible for them. There's not really any clear ways to win this game. But let's see. Did end up getting extra waterfall throw, which is really nice versus this Venusaur. So they're probably going to throw 2 more and then throw the 3 more. I really like this play here. I really like this play because it's 5 more turns for the Venusaur to get to the 3rd Frenzy Plan. 3 more waterfalls is 4.5 turns. So they're going to be able to beat the Venusaur by half a turn and be able to land the Stro Pick, which is going to KO the Venusaur. So really nice play there. They end up coming into Gallade here. So they get the Incinerate through. In my opinion, maybe the best way to win was to... There's not really any way to win here, to be honest, because they're not going to be able to get to the move in time, and the Typhlosion is just going to be a little bit too strong in the back. So otherwise, I think a perfectly fine attempt. Maybe switch out a little bit sooner into the Lapras, especially when you're losing the Galvantula versus Gallade matchup, which you shouldn't end up losing. Okay, so kind of a weird matchup here. So gonna throw the lunge here. Interesting that they didn't throw at the Galvantula beforehand, before it was debuffed. So, but it looks like they wanted to build up a little bit of energy. Gonna shield one of them anyways. They're definitely gonna be able to land the second one. Before the second debuff comes through. I don't think there's a point in shielding this one. Oh, they end up double shielding. Okay, they're gonna go all in on this matchup. Unfortunately, the opponent says like, "Nah, I'm out of here. I've already been debuffed," and they actually end up catching the move onto Swampert here. I don't mind them building up energy here before switching out. I think that's actually a really nice play. They end up throwing the Earthquake, but as you can see, the Earthquake does less damage than it normally would. Gonna throw at 3 here before, kind of after, between when they would throw the potential Hydro Cannon and the second Earthquake. They end up farming down, which is really nice. Here comes Abomasnow. Gonna throw the Ice Beam here. Hiding the Ice Beam is really nice here, because most people won't end up shielding us, because they know it's not going to be a Skull Bash. And then... They're gonna throw the Energy Ball here. So this is really not maybe the best situation here. So gonna throw the Lunge, which I think is good. They come into Talonflame. I think should have switched out faster here. Would have been better, but this is a very favorable matchup for them. Because they can basically just fast move everything down. The Volt Switches are going to be enough, even though they're crazy boosted at this point in time, and Galvantula is weak to it. It's able to land the second move before the Talonflame can take out the Galvantula. So really nice play there. I believe this is the last game. This game is like, there's some minor learning points, which is very unconventional here. So this Galvantula mirror is an absolute nightmare. They both have the same CP, so they're both trying to sneak in the extra move. I think they CMP high here. Maybe they don't. So there's a lunge here. So they end up getting the extra move here. So I really don't like throwing the move right away after I get the extra one. I like to throw another move, so they end up getting it back. They end up throwing this lunge here, which they end up not shielding. So here, Even though Gavantula is really good against the back line, you got to start thinking about switching out. Or you should actually end up building a little bit more energy. So this is a mistake here. So the fact that they got the lunge off here is they should actually build up a little bit more energy before throwing the lunge in case this situation happens where they don't shield. And now they're going to come in a Machamp. And the reality here is it's a very tough situation, but you cannot stay if you're the Gavantula. You cannot stay because you're like a million times debuffed. It's way better for you to switch out and try to utilize that HP and energy for later. But they end up making a huge mistake here by staying in and throwing the discharge here. I wouldn't even mind it if they saved this discharge and switched out into Lapras. Because you can see how little this discharge does to the Machamp, and it was a complete waste of energy. And they're not going to be able to utilize that energy effectively. I know it's you watch like the very best battlers, they would be very comfortable switching out there, knowing that their Gavantula switched out and they have 2 Pokemon weak to fighting. They would just go for it, right? Because otherwise they end up in this matchup here, which it puts them in an incredibly challenging position, and they have no energy on Gavantula to try to overcome the backline by having the inferior backline. So this Venusaur gets the farm down. So they're at like 4 right now. Really, really not good. They have to catch a move. That's basically the only way they can win. Yeah, this is very, very, very bad for them. They end up shielding. This doesn't really matter. They would have to shield and take 1 anyways. And at this point in time, you have to try to catch. And this player knows that's exactly what they have to do. Unfortunately, it's going to be really tough because it's just they're just going to be able to expect it here. So they go for 3 waterfalls. I think it's better to try to switch on evens, because like 3 waterfalls is like 4.5 turns. So they're like in between their 4th and 5th Vine Whip. It's better to either switch at 2 waterfalls, which is 3 turns exactly, or 4, which is 6 turns, or throw the 3, then wait half a second, then switch. But unfortunately, the opponent just knows that's going to happen. They know that's the only lose con, so basically they just wait for the switch to happen, and nothing they can do there. So when I'm looking at this, there's like different ways to evaluate players. This is from YTX Pikachu. A is typing. No, the first one's typing. Second one's line prediction. Third one is counting. Fourth one is switch response. And then the 5th one is catching moves. So I think they generally know their typings. There's not any issues here. It's basically an A. Predictions, I think they could have made better predictions in some of the games to help them better optimize their play. Counting, I don't see any problem with their counting. It's relatively fine. It could be a little bit more optimized when they're talking about farming up or identifying those situations. Switch response, I think it's fine. Catching the moves, obviously, I think is okay. Not too many caught moves here, but I guess the Dark Pulse onto Lapras early on, but there wasn't really too many opportunities here, which is, I think, is totally fine. There's a few other criteria I want to include in the former ones, but overall, this player is strong, knows the matchups, knows that they need to switch out or do whatnot. There's just like small optimizations around team reading, around gameplay that they could improve in order to be a more successful battler. I'm confident that they'll probably hit Legend later this season, given the time remaining. But I think with some more slight improvements, they could see even more success. And hopefully, you'll be able to take away the lessons that I did recapping these battles in order to help you improve your own gameplay. So anyways, let me know what rating range I should do next. Should I go higher? Should I go lower? Let me know, and look forward to doing more videos like this. Anyways, I'll leave it there. If you like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see everyone in the next video.